All right, some folks from Milwaukee, welcome. From Philly, hello, nice to see you. Awesome. Got a great crowd with us tonight. So as folks are introducing themselves, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Christian Hernandez. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm a recently re-elected member of the National Political Committee, the political leadership body of the Democratic Socialists of America, the largest socialist organization in the country with more than 95,000 members and nearly 250 chapters in every part of the US. The world we deserve is ours to win, and we know it will take a mass socialist organization to do that. So if you're not yet a member and joining us tonight, I invite you to sign up to join DSA at dsausa.org/join and get involved with your local chapter. Glad to be sharing virtual space with y'all tonight as we talk about the importance of migrant representation and participation. As an organization, we recognize that we live in the heart of empire and that solidarity with comrades from all over the world is necessary to work towards a unified global vision of socialism. As socialists, we know that migrants experience some of the most cruel and exploitive crimes under our current capitalist system. The violence of a militarized border, the harmful xenophobic and racist immigration policies that govern our day-to-day, and an insatiable prison industrial complex that further profits off immigrants. These all serve to make immigrants scapegoats for the reality that billionaires profit while the bosses pay poverty wages. DSA stands by the idea that migration is a human right and that no human is illegal. We will continue to fight to make sure it's another step towards a world where we can move freely, a world without borders. And the best way to fight is by being strategic with our demands and organized in our movements. This is why I'm a DSA member. These fights can't be won alone. And part of our task as socialist organizers is reminding people of their power and showing our fellow members of the working class that we are protagonists in the struggle for a better world. It is not enough to have a seat at the table. We want power, which is why it's important to be actively involved in the processes and decisions that affect the way that we live. As we see the attacks on the voting of the right wing on voting rights all over the country, it's important to remember that more than 11 million immigrants do not have a political voice at the ballot box in this country, but it is part of our vision for democracy that everyone, regardless of status, should be allowed to vote and participate in the decisions that affect our lives. Now, for the most part, it can be hard enough to keep up with politics in one country, let alone in two or more. But there are people doing this, including those who were forced out of their homelands by NAFTA or other economic factors. People like my father, who was the first to introduce me to the concept of soy de aquí y de allá. He has dual citizenship and was able to vote for AMLO and Bernie and later Biden. My parents are both from Guanajuato, Mexico, and remind me of why our work must transcend borders. Many migrants are able to exercise their political muscle in local elections, and our main speaker will be sharing more about why this matters, specifically within the context of Mexico and the left-wing MORENA party. On June 6th, Mexico held its congressional election, and MORENA, led by the current president Andrés Manuel López Obrador, increased its majority. For the first time in history, migrant deputies were elected to the Mexican Congress. What this means is that Mexican nationals who reside abroad are now directly represented and involved in the Mexican Congress. One of those elected deputies and our main speaker tonight is Jorge Mújica, who now holds the title of Diputado Federal Suplente en la Cámara de Diputados del Congreso de la Unión, or alternate federal deputy in the Mexican Congress, which is just amazing. He's also an organizer with Arise Chicago, an organization that partners with immigrants, workers, and faith communities to fight workplace injustice through education, organizing, and advocating for public policy changes. He serves as a member of the National Council of the National Writers Union and is a co-chair of DSA's Immigrant Rights Working Group. Welcome, Jorge, and over to you. And Jorge, you're still muted. Got a little excited.
There we go. Okay, now great. I can speak, I guess. Well, thank you very much thank you for the introduction, and yes, for the brief history and background. And I'm going to expand on that because the intention here, I think, is to let everyone know how this incredible thing happened of a community, an expat community got to be represented in Congress in Mexico And oddly enough, or not, how a member of the DSA gets to be a Mexican congressman, which is an incredible, I guess, complicated international politics. When we think about international politics, we think about in terms of governments, government to government. We don't think about communities doing politics in either one or both of the countries. And this is where I am today, and it's a little bit confusing, but let me start with history. The first time Mexicans in the United States requested the right to vote from abroad happened in 1928. In 1928, there was a very controversial election. General Álvaro Obregón was elected president, and he was killed. He was assassinated being president-elect. So there had to be a new election, and there was a call for new elections, obviously, to replace him. The elections didn't happen for 2 years. We had an interim president, but the point is that there was an opposition leader, Jose Vasconcelos, who happened to be a political refugee, Mexican political refugee in San Francisco. He had been a minister of education in a previous Mexican government, but he was living in exile, and he decided to run for president in the special elections. And his constituents and his followers and supporters decided to ask Congress for the right to vote from abroad. Obviously, the Mexican government was not going to allow people who they knew were going to vote against the government or the official candidate. They were not about to allow them to vote. So this petition didn't go anywhere. And we, in the middle of another sort of government crisis, contested election, revived the demand to vote from abroad. This was in 1988. So 60 years after the first time it was petitioned, 60 years after, we petitioned again for the right of Mexicans living abroad to vote in Mexican elections. This happened because in 1988, a former member of the official party, Partido Revolucionario Institucional, el PRI, broke off from the party and decided to run independently for president. And we believe, and I think it's been proven over and over, that he won the election, but he was cheated out of the results. The Mexican government was not going to allow an independent candidate running and winning a presidential election. So that was Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, Ingeniero Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, who ran and decidedly won the election. But he was cheated out of the results, and we decided to revive the petition and demand to vote from abroad, to vote from the United States. There are about, it depends and it varies with time, but there are about 15 million Mexicans born in Mexico living in the United States. Now they and their descendants, it doesn't matter what generation, you may be the grandson or granddaughter of Mexicans who were born in Mexico, or even of Mexicans who were born in Texas or California or anywhere you want. You can claim Mexican nationality, and eventually at age 18, you can claim Mexican citizenship. So maybe there are about 25 million people in the United States who could eventually vote and participate in the Mexican elections. But let me guide you through the very crooked route this demand has taken. In the year 2000, we were able to expand and made a very detailed demand on how we wanted not only to vote, but also to be represented in Congress. The Mexican Constitution says that every Mexican citizen has the right to vote and to be elected to any government position. So we said, okay, we not only want to vote from abroad, but we want to be elected also. and to have representatives of the Mexican community in Mexican Congress. And we provide the idea of having congressmen, diputados, and senadores, senators and congressmen coming from the migrant community, the Mexican migrant community, mostly in the United States. 98% of Mexicans living abroad live in the United States. And the other 2% or 5% are distributed in Canada and any other country in the world, Bolivia, España, Saudi Arabia, etc. But 98% live in the United States. So we wanted not only the right to vote, but also the right to be elected to serve in Congress and represent this community. In 2005, we won for the first time this right to vote from abroad. Not the right to be elected, but the right to vote from abroad. But it was incredibly complicated. It was, and we always give an example. It's like your kid graduates, from college, and you give him a car, but you don't give him the keys. So my son, my daughter, there's your car, but I won't give you the keys because I don't know how you drive. And that's exactly what happened with us. The right to vote was approved in federal Congress, but the mechanism to exercise the vote was so complicated that it was impossible to vote in the next 3 elections for Mexican Congress and Mexican presidential elections. The car was right there in the driveway, but we didn't have the keys. It was impossible, starting with the fact that in order to vote from abroad, you had to have a voting card issued in Mexico. You couldn't get a voting card in the United States. You had to go back to Mexico, do the whole paperwork, get your voting card in Mexico, and then come back to the United States and then manifest your desire to vote from the United States. And there wasn't a mechanism how to exercise that vote. So the car was there in the driveway, but we didn't get the keys. We had to wait until the year 2015 in order to get voting cards issued in the Mexican consulates. So the first time we were really able to exercise our vote was in the year 2018. There were a few people who could vote and participate in the 2015 midterm elections, but really the only big chance we had to vote in any Mexican election was in the year 2018. That's the election President López Obrador won. The left or center left won with the Movimiento de Renovación Nacional, the movement for the renovation of Mexico. And it was only about 20% of Mexicans who had been able to acquire the voting card in the United States were able to participate in the election. We had 500,000, more or less, 480,000 people who had obtained their voting cards, but only 1,000 of them could effectively exercise their vote. Because still, even with the fact that you could get your voting card in the Mexican consulate, there was a second step after you got it in the mail, and many times it got lost in the mail. But after you got it in the mail, you had to activate it, prove that you had received it and that you were the person who had actually asked for this voting card. So it was a back and forth, phone calls and codes and I don't know what. And then after that, there was a third step, meaning that you had to express your will to vote from the United States in order to be, for your name to be registered in the list, in the voters list of Mexicans voting from abroad. So out of the almost 500,000 people who had obtained the cards, only 100,000 of them could exercise their vote. And this number went even down precipitously in the midterm elections of June of 2021. So 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Out of almost 2 million voting cards issued in the Mexican consulates abroad, only 60,000 people were able to complete the whole process. The process gets complicated because you get an election package in the mail. You have to go to the post office to receive your package. And then you receive, propaganda from all the political parties, because political parties in Mexico are absolutely forbidden from campaigning outside Mexican territory. So your only way, supposedly, to be informed about the different options or candidates or parties is your electoral package. It's a real package. This is like a 5-pound package that you have to go to the post office, because the post office is not going to deliver it in your mailbox. It simply doesn't fit. So out of this, 2 million people who eventually were supposedly able to participate, only 60,000 of them participated in the election 3 months ago. So it is still incredibly complicated to try to exercise the right to vote from abroad. Now, what happened in the middle of all these complications is that a group of migrants decided to raise the demand we have a special election tribunal in Mexico. So they went to the election tribunal and said, you know what, we have only half the right, because we have the right to vote, but we still don't have the right to elect anyone. So we want the election tribunal to take a look at us as a disadvantaged population, just as people with disabilities, as women, as youth, or LGBT communities. And we want the electoral tribunal to exercise our right to be taken into account by affirmative action. And the election tribunal said, yes, you have a sound argument. And they decided 2 weeks, pretty much 2 weeks before the June 6th election, they decided that all Mexican political parties should include migrant candidates in their lists. Now, let me be a little bit more detailed here. Mexican Congress got both chambers, senators, and congressmen. And these midterm elections only elected representatives in the lower chamber, in the Cámara de Diputados. So 2 weeks before the actual closing of the election cycle, meaning the registration of candidates, etc., the tribunal says you have to include migrants in your lists. The lower chamber, the Chamber of Representatives, pretty much, has 300 deputies, diputados, congressmen, elected in electoral districts, territorial. And it has an added list of supplemental congressmen. These congressmen are elected based on a list of candidates each political party presents, and they are assigned according to affirmative action and percentage of votes each political party wins in the election. So it's a list of 200 people assigned to Congress according to the percentage of votes by political party and by affirmative action. So to make it short, we ended up, after the June 6th elections were counted, results were counted, and balanced, and affirmative actions were exercised, etc. We ended up with 10 people from the migrant community being elected to the Chamber of Deputies, La Cámara de Diputados, so congressmen, federal congressmen. We have 5 diputados migrantes from MORENA, the president's party, 3 men, 2 women. We have 3 migrant diputados from the National Action Party. That's the center right-wing party. 2 men and 1 woman. 1 Diputada Federal from the Institutional Revolutionary Party, el PRI, she's a woman, and 1 also woman from Movimiento Ciudadano, the citizens movement. So 10 migrant diputados and diputadas, 5 men and 5 women, 5, half of them from MORENA, and the president's party, and the other 5 from the 3 other parties. Now, what the intention of this is, because as Christian was mentioning, one thing is about to have 1 seat in the table, in this case, 10 seats out of 500 on the table. And the other one is to empower the community. So what is the intention of having these diputados migrantes and diputadas migrantes? Well, is to find the shortcuts to really bring the migrant agenda to the Mexican Congress. Just like the case of the right to vote from abroad, which took us 25 years, pretty much, or is so far 30 years. It's taken us 30 years to implement. There are 1,000 demands from the Mexican community in the United States related to the treatment by Mexican Congress, the Mexican government services in the United States, etc. And pretty much all of these demands have been always ignored because we have never had representation in Congress. So the agenda, the migrant agenda, is composed of like 1,000 different items, from obviously simplifying the exercise and the right to vote and be elected from abroad. We not only want representatives in the lower chamber, we also want migrant senators, and we have a proposal to do that. We want not only to be elected by affirmative action, but to create a mechanism to elect them, you know, forever, a real mechanism that is not exercising affirmative action, but a set number of Mexican diputados and Mexican senators to be elected from the migrant community. Then we have the whole problem of the attention of the federal, all the government, not only state. Oh, I'm sorry. We want to be able to vote for governorship elections and for county elections. You know, many of the relationships of the Mexican community abroad with their towns of origin is precisely at that level, at the town level. You know, we want to talk to the presidents of our county boards. We not only want to be able to vote for president or senators or diputados, we want to be able to elect, to participate in the election of governor and to participate in the election of mayors, city mayors, and county boards and representatives, etc., etc., etc. And then the attention of the Mexican government to Mexicans living abroad, the famous consulados. Mexico is the country with the most extensive consular network in the world. 51 consulates in the United States, 6 consulates in Canada, and then a dozen more consulates in the rest of the world. And what we have is incredibly insufficient. To give you an example, there are about more or less 1 million Mexicans in the area covered by 1 Mexican consulate in Chicago. So it's like 1 million people only have 1 government office to do all the paperwork, all the whatever you need to do with the Mexican government, from issuing birth certificates to passports to matricular IDs to pay, to be able to pay the property tax if you own property in Mexico, and any other thing you can imagine. yeah, we have only one office for 1 million people. And obviously, these consulates are absolutely insufficient. In Chicago, the Mexican consulate is giving attention to about 180,000 people a year. So it would take 5 years to just, you know, for each Mexican to go once to the Mexican consulate. So we need to change the relationship between the Mexican government and the needs of the Mexican community abroad. We have the whole issue of the money remittances, how we have to pay here. The money gets transferred. We lose money in the transfer because of the dollar peso exchange. And then our relatives in Mexico are charged another amount in order to receive the money. They are cheated many times of the money. Someone is speaking very loudly there. Please mute yourselves. So we lose money in the transfers. Is the calculation more or less is that Mexicans abroad are paying $1,000 million, so pretty much $1 billion, just in fees to transfer money every year from the United States to Mexico. So we want to change that, obviously. We need to attend to the situation of Mexico becoming a sanctuary country. Just as we have pushed here in the United States for many cities and states to be sanctuary cities and states, we want Mexico to become a sanctuary country where people from Central America, South America, or any other country in the world can come and transit freely, can request asylum, can request refuge, without Mexico becoming a second border of the United States, south of the border of the United States. We don't want Mexico to follow the policies, the incredibly anti-immigrant policies that the United States has followed for so long. So we want Mexico to become a sanctuary country. And that is an issue the Mexican diputados and diputadas migrantes are going to be addressing in Mexican Congress. I think that's pretty much it. So many years ago, I remember having a conversation with members of DSA in Chicago at a time where one of the Mexican political parties, the leftist Partido por la Revolución Mexicana, was very strong, both in Mexico and in the United States. And I told them there will be a day when a Mexican activist from a Mexican political party will be elected in the Chicago City Council. And oddly enough, it happened exactly the other way around. I am a member of DSA, and now I get to serve in the Mexican Congress. So the history didn't come exactly as I thought it would be, but that's history. So that's how we are taking a different look at these binational, international policies being applied from the bottom up instead of only being relationships between governments. And I think I'm going to close with that and allow for Q&A and the public's participation. Thank you very much, everyone. Christian?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jorge. We do have one question so far. And again, if any questions popped up while you were listening to Jorge relay all that important information and the process, you can use the Q&A feature, or you can just put it in the chat and I'll get to that. So from Chance, he says, amazing presentation, Jorge. Can you talk about Morena's relationship with other parties supporting their electoral coalition? As in, how did the coalition come about? What changed from the last election to this one?
Yes, of course. Mexican election politics are very fluid. We have the chance to, which doesn't happen in the United States, we have the chance to register political parties every 6 years. In this election in June 6 of 2021, 11 political parties participated. 3 of them lost their registration because they didn't get the percentage required to continue living as a political party. But election politics are incredibly fluid. There are alliances, there are coalitions every time. There are national coalitions and there are state coalitions. So any given political party can coalesce with another one at a federal level, but at the same time coalesce with an opposition party at the state level or even at the district level. So it would take us like a big seminar, very many hours long, to really examine what happened in all this. But in the short answer is the coalition, Morena, has been allied with the Workers' Party, el Partido de los Trabajadores, for like forever. And then it allied for this time around with the Green Party also. The Green Party is a center of the center political party. It aligns to both sides of the aisle any given time and in any given vote in Congress. But this time around, they decided to come to the left side with Morena and the Workers' Party. And between the 3 of them, they have majority, simple majority in the Chamber of Diputados. So there is the obvious chance, guarantee somehow, that the agenda of Morena is going to prevail in Congress for the following 3 years. There is no qualified majority. And Morena didn't have qualified majority either in the past legislature. So there's, in order to make constitutional changes, there would have to be new alliances with the PRI and the PAN. But at least there's a simple majority, and the policies of the president, I think, can go through and ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is from Facebook. Aside from the consulates, what other issues will you be working on? What's next on the agenda?
Oof, you know, politics and legislation is incredibly complicated. For instance, I'm spending this week in Mexico, the full 5 days, Monday through Friday. And so far, I have written 5 bills to be presented in the Chamber of Diputados, in la Cámara de Diputados in the following weeks. One of them is related to the La Ley de Partidos Políticos, which basically says that no Mexican political parties can do anything outside of the Mexican territory, which it basically means you cannot be a full militant of any political party, Mexican political party, if you live abroad. And at the same time, well, it means that you can't campaign, you can't open up party offices in the United States, etc. So I wrote a bill on that. I wrote a bill on the, ¿cómo se llama esto? La Ley Federal de Ingresos. Is the law that says how much the Mexican government can charge of any kind of paperwork you need to do. And it says in a very particular paragraph that if you have an emergency paperwork to be, processed, you have to pay 30% more over the normal dues. And the problem is that during the pandemic, many people saw themselves in emergency situations where they needed a passport or they needed a matrícula consular, and they were overcharged. And so I wrote a very simple proposal saying one thing is urgent and another thing is emergency. So when I want a passport issued, very fast, maybe I should pay for the surcharge. But if I am in an emergency, I shouldn't, because most of migrants, given the situation of the Mexican consulates, have emergencies. It's not only urgent, but it's really an emergency, because in order to schedule a date with the Mexican consulate, given the capacity, in order to go get my passport, I have to wait for 3 months or 4 months. That's how long the delay, you know, from asking for your appointment to actually getting your appointment to go to the Mexican consulate. So many people need documents on emergency basis. So that's, you know, it's legislation. There are laws, thousands of laws that affect the migrant community. So I have written 5 so far this week, and it's only, what, Thursday? So maybe I'll write another 2 by Friday.
Amazing. Absolutely. And I mean, I can say for me, that's my holdup. We have a consulado here in Dallas, and yes, it takes months to have any sort of appointment. I'm trying to get my dual citizenship, and it's, you know, taking forever. And I know a lot of folks, you know, get really desperate with situations that are obviously outside of their control. Another question we have is, someone asked, how strong is the labor movement and labor unions in Mexico?
And that's a very interesting question, and that also has to do with binational international politics. Traditionally, labor unions in Mexico were corporatized. They were official unions, meaning basically promoted by the Mexican government, but then controlled by the Mexican government. Yellow unions or company unions, so to speak. Back in the 1970s, there was a big movement, big revolution. 1972, I think, saw the largest number of strikes ever in the history of Mexico, and a big movement for independence and autonomy of labor unions from the Mexican government, you know, grew immensely. And so the unions recomposed, modified their structures, etc. But over time, they fell into the same problem again. You know, negotiations with the Mexican government. If you were a labor union leader, you ended up in Congress sooner or later. Pretty much every president of every major labor union in Mexico at some point was a senator or a diputado, a congressman. So it was a negotiation thing. Now, since the signing of the TEMEC, the new trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, there is a new phenomenon. Article 23 of this international treaty allows for Mexico or the United States or Canada to complain to the other country about the working conditions of their citizens in any other of the 3 countries. So there was a complaint raised by the AFL-CIO in the United States regarding a Ford Motors Company plant in Silao, Guanajuato, where there was a company union, and this company union had approved, validated the new collective bargaining agreement without consulting with their members. So an international complaint was presented, and it was decided that there should be a new election where the members of this union in Mexico, this company union, could not only vote on the new collective bargaining agreement, but they could also vote on decertifying their current union. And that happened 3 weeks ago. You can, Google the news, Ford and Silao and Union, and you will see all the details. The members of the union voted overwhelmingly to decertify their union. They are looking for a new union, creating a new union now, and not to ratify the collective bargaining agreement. And that could also happen sooner or later in the United States, because now, for instance, and that's also in the agenda of the Mexican diputados, migrant diputados, the Mexican consulate has the right and the obligation to defend Mexican nationals working in the United States. So any given day, the Mexican consulate can lift the phone and call a United States company owner and say, hey, I am the Mexican consul and I'm representing your Mexican workers and their rights are being violated and you can't do that. So there's going to be a lot of fluidity with Mexican unions, U.S. unions, and the whole labor issue and participation, hopefully, of the Mexican government intervening in the favor of Mexican migrants in the United States is also complicated, but we will be working on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jorge. We have a couple more questions. Hopefully we can get through all of them. We have about 5 more minutes. Someone else asked, as you know, not everyone on the Mexican left is happy with all of AMLO's policies. I'm familiar with eco-socialist opposition to the Tren Maya, which I believe is the Huantepec Isthmus rail corridor. Is there any opposition within Morena to these disastrous projects, or are they sure to move forward?
There is opposition within Morena, definitely. Just like any political parties, there are factions and fractions inside the party. But mostly, I think Morena tends to support the president. So if the president believes and has made a case of the Tren Maya, then mostly Morena overwhelmingly supports that. The opposition within Morena tries, and very successfully in many ways, to present the arguments, scientific arguments and environmental impact arguments, why this should be done this way or the other way or the other way. So it doesn't confront the president as Morena. Morena as a whole supports the president, and whoever doesn't agree exactly with the policies of the president is trying to make sensible arguments. So that works very well. And I see another question here. Can I talk about the dirty legal tactics used by the right against Morena candidates in Mexico City? Yes, of course I can. For the first time, and it is a try and error thing, trying to simplify the vote from abroad. For the first time, the Election Institute of Mexico City decided to try electronic voting, and something really weird happened. In paper ballots, Morena migrant candidate won, but in the electronic vote, the National Action Party candidate won. The paper ballots, the victory was about 60-40. In the electronic vote, the margin was 80-20. So there are big suspicions. One diputado I was talking to says, we don't have proof, but we don't have doubt that there was something very fishy in that electronic election. So we can't prove it, but we don't have doubts that there was something very wrong in exercising the electronic vote. So that takes us, into what's going to happen in 2024 presidential elections if the electronic vote is instituted. And the other problem is this thing I was mentioning, that political parties cannot campaign abroad. And the Morena candidate was located in New York, and she restrained herself from campaigning. But the National Action Party candidate actually was in Mexico, living in Mexico. So he didn't have limitations to campaign because he was in Mexican territory, campaigning for his candidacy as migrant. So that's a lesson to be learned. If you can't campaign in the United States, go to Mexico and campaign from Mexico, even if you're a migrant candidate.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about what it means to campaign, as an expat? I mean, did you have to spend time in Mexico? Like, how big was the base that voted you in to the Congreso?
I don't think campaigning for 3 months gives you the most outstanding results. I think you have to campaign throughout your life. I mean, what do you do every day, every week, every month, and every year of your life is what really counts. The last 3 months, the campaigning months, is just for letting people know that you are running. But you should have a base already. People should know you, and you should know your base, and you should interact with your base. That would be my basic recommendation for anyone. You know, whether you are running for another country or you're running here, is what you do throughout your life that gives you presence. And then the last 3 months is just to go knock on doors and letting people know that you are going to be in the ballot. I was a openly socialist candidate for Chicago City Council 6 years ago. 6 years, yeah, I think 6 years ago. And I lost miserably because people knew me, but I didn't have a solid base in any given territorial district. I had a broad base, you know, from all over the United States in the Mexican community, but only a few amount of people can vote in any given political district. So you have, if you have the intention of running in a political district, then you have to be known in that political district. I'm known, I think, United States wide as a migrant leader. So people support me, I know, but I use a lot of Facebook, you know, basically, and that's how my base has been growing. I have I don't know, like 21,000 followers or something like that in Facebook, and that's the amount of people that somehow participate or want to get information and that follow me, and that's the people I will respond to. You know, I will ask for feedback and input on what the legislative agenda should be to be taken to Congress, and that's the people I will respond of, you know, what happened in Mexican Congress. I will report back to them.
Great, that makes complete sense, and absolutely always have to have a base to make the ask. We have one last question. Do you want to address what we U.S. citizens can do from inside the U.S. to protect refugees from Central America, or to protect in Mexico refugees now under orders to stay there until they are allowed into the U.S.?
Well, I think the United States has got an incredibly flawed immigration system. I think that instead of the patrulla fronteriza, you know, the border patrol, we should get every agent of the border patrol a desk, a computer, and a window to be receiving asylum and refugee petitions. You know, it's totally absurd to be trying to detain people in the border because we don't have capacity to receive them. If we follow the law, we should receive their petitions and allow them in. And that's what we should be doing. And that's what Mexico also should be doing in the southern border. Instead of sending the National Guard to try to contain Haitians and Guatemalans and Hondurans who are trying to cross Mexico in order to get to the United States, we should set up 1,000 desks and 1,000 computers and receive 1,000 petitions on any given day. But let me mention this. On Monday, the Judicial Committee in the House of Representatives is going to meet to give entry to the 4 different bills of legalization for DACAs, TPS, agricultural workers, and essential workers. On the 15th Wednesday, the National Security Committee of the House of Representatives is going to meet and try to consolidate the 4 bills into one. And that is going to be a big problem because Republicans are going to try to limit the number of people who could eventually be legalized. So the meeting of the National Security Committee on Wednesday is going to be critical. Call congressmen and call senators and let them know that you want as broader as possible legalization. On the 19th, they will have to present the consolidated bill, and the bill is going to be voted by September the 30th. By September 30th, we are going to have legalization for 1 million, 2 million, 500,000, or 8 million people in the United States.
That is amazing news. Great to hear. Thank you so much, Jorge. So much. I know everyone that attended and everyone that's watching us from Facebook is sure to have learned a lot. And thank you so much for your work. I'm going to pass it over to Janita, who's going to let folks know how they can get involved in the Immigrant Rights Working Group.
Hello, everyone. I am looking for my screen. I had a bunch of links to post to everyone. But first of all, I wanted to say thank you to everybody for attending tonight, and we're really glad that you were here. We would love for you to get more involved with the Immigrant Rights Working Group and help further our work. I have a few links to post for you. So the next Immigrant Rights Working Group general membership meeting is the following Thursday, September the 16th. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. I'm going to post that into the chat now if you want to register for that. Hold on. The link is not posting. Here we go. That's the link to register. We're also asking that you sign on to the opposition letter to the Farm Workers Modernization Act. Basically, the long and short of it is that it's an oppressive bill, and we're trying to convince Bernie Sanders to oppose it. Currently, he's supporting it, but it essentially subjects migrant workers to 10 to 15 years of servitude, which we believe is exploitative, and we're asking you to sign on to the opposition letter opposing this bill. And I'm posting that into the chat now as well. Nope. Okay, the links aren't working. I'm gonna have to copy and paste them specifically. 1 second. And that should work. Also, we have a toolkit to get started organizing, a resource folder, and I will post those links as well into the chat. Looks like I'll have to copy and paste the links separately. So just 1 second and I'll get those to you. And if you have any questions, you can email the Immigrant Rights Working Group. I'm posting our email into the chat. As well as our join link through Action Network. Which is there. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope you'll get more involved and help us reach out nationwide to fight for immigrant rights across the country and support the work of our working group. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight.